Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Um, I um, I thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce myself and go over what we are going to be doing in this webinar, I want to welcome each and one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us today. I hope that your families and are doing well and you are safe. We appreciate everything that you're doing for your students at this time, and so many of you are going above and beyond, and your work is truly appreciated. This webinar on YouTube by Dean Henry Aronson is brought to you by the two faculty development centers in the Touro College and University system. In the Western Division, that is Nevada and California, we have the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. And in the East Coast, in New York, we have the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And the two centers are very excited to bring this webinar to you today. My name is Rima Arana. I am the Director for Strategic Initiatives at the Office of the Provost at Touro College. I am also the coordinator for the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning in New York. So it is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jim O'Connor. He is the director of the Center of Innovative Learning and Teaching in the Western Division, that is Touro University, California and Nevada. He is also professor and founding dean emeritus at the College of Education and Health Sciences in California. It has been a pleasure, as always, to work with him. So Jim, please take it away.
Thank you, Rima. I appreciate your introduction, and I want to welcome everyone here and thank you for the time that you're spending to try to improve your teaching. I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Henry Aronson. He is the Dean of Lander College of Arts and Sciences at Touro College. He's a native of Northern Ontario. He's a veteran YouTube instructor. He developed the first continuing education program in the Touro system. He's the author of several books on Jewish history and thought, and has also held visiting and postdoctoral fellowships at Harvard, Cornell, Oxford, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His research and teaching has been recognized by the National Endowment of the Humanities, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and he is the recipient of the Excellence in the Academy Award from the National Education Association. So welcome, Dean Aronson, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Dean O'Connor. That was a really great introduction. I'm glad it's being recorded, so then I'm going to play it back for my mom later, and she will really, as they say in Yiddish, she'll shep nachas, she'll really enjoy it. I have to say I'm unusually delighted to be here with all of you in the webinar because you know, I have the pleasure of speaking to many different kinds of audiences, but my favorite audience for sure is speaking to fellow educators, people who understand the unique challenges of conveying information in both an informative and entertaining manner. It's such a difficult skill that includes both, you know, a tremendous amount of erudition. You've got to be able to assemble all of this knowledge, and at the same time, you have to serve it in a way that's it's really a performance art. And so a lot of these skills that come together only in very special people. I'm so grateful to be in this room together with you, at least virtually. And I'd like to spend the next 30 minutes or so sharing with you some of the skills that I've picked up with hard-earned experience, and hopefully you will take them and go to much greater heights than I have. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to expose you to a program called Prezi, which is essentially, I think on a simple level, it's sort of like PowerPoint on steroids. It's much more powerful than PowerPoint because unlike PowerPoint, which essentially lives in your computer and thinks essentially like a slide projector, you remember those things, by the way? They're like these kind of things to set on a tabletop, and you had a round device at the top with little tiny transparencies called films or slides. And everything was very linear. It was one slide after another. You never knew when the event was going to end. And of course, they jammed all the time and things like that. Prezi, rather than working in a linear fashion, which is essentially PowerPoint, works in a canvas, which gives you an entire scope of what's going to be said. And so as an audience member, one of the important questions you want to answer for yourself is, how long is this going to last? How much more does he have to say? Prezi gives you the opportunity to broadcast that in a perhaps deceptive way. Like, so you see from this first initial slide, I've got 4 main points that I want to go into: why YouTube, the law of grandma, how to YouTube, and welcome to Gen Z. And all 4 of those things are going to be covered in the next half hour, so you get a sense of how long it's going to take. So that's kind of like a bonus point. It's not really on topic for what we want to say today, but let's go straight to what's our assigned topic. You may be wondering, why did I call this Finding Velcro on the Moon? Well, it's actually very much related to our contemporary circumstance. When the moonshot was first conceived in the 1960s, there were a lot of people grumbling, saying, why are we doing this? Why are we actually considering going to the moon? We have so many difficulties on the planet right now. What's the benefit of going to the moon? And the truth is, it's often a difficult question to really answer properly. And among the many responses was, well, as a result of the moonshot, we discovered Velcro, right? They had to find ways to tie their shoes in space, and Velcro was invented. Similarly, the powdered drink Tang, which was a staple of my childhood diet, all of these things really came together as a result of the moon. So we too are living in these unusual circumstances where we are banished from our classrooms, and we have to somehow engage with our students on a virtual platform. How are we supposed to do it? Especially for those of us who, being good performance artists, really rely on the visual cues of body language, of tonality, register, pitch, things like that. How are we supposed to do it in a 2-dimensional screen when the size of the image we present to our students is about the size of a postage stamp on my laptop? So I hope to give you some of those skills with this YouTube, and maybe we'll be able to find some Velcro as a result of this unusual moment. So first of all, why should we really be considering YouTube seriously? What is so special about YouTube for educators? So we should note that a lot of our students use YouTube. That should be a fairly obvious statement. A Pew study indicated that 73% of adults use YouTube, which is a large number, but it's especially significant when you look at the number of college-age adults. It rises to 90%. So younger people are overwhelmingly using YouTube, and people who are somewhat older are still, a majority of them are using YouTube in a very significant way. And perhaps more importantly, however, this trend is continuing. That a study done elsewhere indicated that kids in the United States from the ages of 8 to 18 have been doubling their use of YouTube in the last 4 years. As bandwidth increases, as digital access increases, people are going to YouTube as a viable source of, well, we'll see what it is. Teens on average only watch 59 minutes of video per day, which actually to me seems like a pretty decent number. That's actually not so bad. If only my teenagers would watch, 59 minutes a day, sometimes I wonder about them. But here's the part that I find fascinating. When queried, according to this study by Common Sense Media, 65% of YouTube users under the age of 18 say they go to YouTube in order to how to make, build, or do something they are interested in, which is essentially, it's an educational tool. I first discovered this quite by accident when my 12-year-old, I think he fixed something under the bathroom sink. And I said, how did you know how to do that? I didn't show you anything. He says, YouTube. And in fact, that has been the go-to solution for younger people at a tremendous degree, and it has tremendous implications. Now, one more really important thing about YouTube that makes it distinct from other social media platforms, A recent study conducted by the Royal Society for Public Health looked at mental health among adolescents and well-being, sense of well-being. And they found that social media is terrible for people's self-image, right? If you're engaged in Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and especially Instagram, which comes from the ninth circle of hell, you are going to feel less happy after using it than before using it. And this is especially true if you're an adolescent. You know, the study is definitely worth looking at. It hypothesizes that, for example, on Instagram, people are constantly looking at other people's highly curated lives and saying, how come my life isn't as good as that person's? So it's just a way of like making yourself feel very depressed. But the standout platform was YouTube, which was the only one of the 5 platforms that actually resulted in a net happiness benefit for adolescents. Meaning, unlike the other platforms, kids felt happier after using YouTube than before using YouTube. That in itself, I think, is a tremendous revelation. So there's definitely more kids on YouTube and more happy kids on YouTube. That's where they live. And I think as educators, we should go where they live in order to do our job. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, me on YouTube, it's a little too much. You know, it's so public. I mean, it's after all, it's owned by Google, right? It actually, YouTube is the second most popular search engine in the world, right? There's Google and then there's YouTube. YouTube is number 2. So you might wonder, why should I do YouTube? And if I have to do video, which, all right, now we're doing a lot more video, especially because of the coronavirus situation. But I have, you know, like in-house materials like Kaltura and Panopto and other things that keep my video like really, really private and just share with my students and things like that. Why should I specifically do YouTube? So one of the most basic laws of the internet is that information yearns to be free. That one of the counterintuitive things, especially if you're my generation, you know, I was born when the surface of the earth was still cooling in the middle half of the 20th century. And, you know, we were taught that information should be hoarded. Information should be like kept tight and close. And you were able to demonstrate your superior erudition because you knew facts that no one else knew. You know, that trend and that way of thinking is completely in the past. I remember when I used to go to the library, which was like a large building. For those of you born after 1985, it was a large building that actually housed these huge printouts that were actually bound between hard covers, and they contained like lots of pages and things. They were called books. And people would razor out pages of the books in order to be the first graduate student to get them, and then the other graduate students wouldn't get them, which is just a crazy way of thinking about knowledge and information. And nowadays, information is just everywhere. We're fact-checked in our classrooms by students with smartphones. So it's no longer about how many facts you have. It's about wisdom. It's about what do you do with those facts? How do you filter those facts? How do you fit those facts together? It's a very different epistemological universe that we're living in. And so we have to get with that current and realize that we have something to offer. We should be contributing to that huge torrent of information rather than trying to hold it back. Now you might say, oh, if I put my stuff on the internet, people will steal it. People will take my videos and they will use it in their own teaching. And that's exactly what we want. We actually want people to recognize your expertise, to take your knowledge, to build upon it. That is how human civilization has developed ever since we started rubbing sticks together and experimenting with different shapes for transporting materials. And if you like, the response is like what my kids would say to me, okay, boomer, think about the Encyclopedia Britannica, which for most of us was like the great repository of information. I grew up in Canada and that's what we used. I'm not sure if Americans use this one because it was very British, but it was like this big, massive 30-volume encyclopedia. People would go door to door and sell it. I mean, of course, you'd have to get it mailed to you. And that was, you know, tremendous information. Now go on eBay and you can get a full set for like $30, $40. It's Wikipedia that people are going to for information. Immediate, fast, crowdsourced. This is the trend of our times, and it shows no sign of slowing down. Finally, you might say, okay, but I'm not good enough to contribute to the world body of information. Why would anyone want to watch my YouTube videos? Well, this is where we have to bring the law of grandma. Grandma loves you. What you do is valuable. What you have to say has significance, eternal significance. It's significance on a global level. The only thing you have to realize is you should not ever put anything on the internet, no matter how private you think it is, that you wouldn't want your grandmother to see. Right? This is one of the rules that I really emphasize with my students because they sometimes lack that basic sense of modesty that we have to develop. But as long as what you're putting out there is a good faith effort to represent what you know and what you want to contribute, it is a contribution to world civilization, and you should be out there doing it because you are a professional educator. Let's now focus on how to YouTube. How do you actually do these things that I'm proposing? So it's actually very easy. First of all, do your thing. Whatever it is, if you are a geography teacher, a geology teacher, mathematics, who knows, whatever it is, record what it is that you teach. It doesn't matter if 100 other people have recorded it. There is value in your specific way of recording it. Someone wrote to me the other day, and I looked at her YouTube channel, and I thought this was exactly a great example. This is English teacher Monica. You can see she's got her name there in her YouTube channel, and she's just got a simple setup with a whiteboard behind her and a camera focused on her. She just uploads it to YouTube. By the way, the only control you really need to know to do this is on the upper right here, where I have the arrow, the little camera there that allows you to upload a video. I don't recommend you necessarily go live right away. That's a little bit more tricky, but uploading your video, that's the easiest thing in the world. You can do it straight from your phone if you want, whatever it takes. But it can be, people will be very forgiving of homemade solutions. And I would hazard to argue that in fact, homemade videos are even more appealing because, in the rhetorical triangle of logos, ethos, and pathos, homemade videos are very high in ethos. They're very high in authenticity and internal credibility. This is the marketplace of ideas, and YouTube is the largest market there is. So if you just present your information in an honest fashion, as clearly as you possibly can, people will consume it and they will appreciate it. That's the basic thing. First, record yourself with any type of camera you have. Obviously, we spend a lot of time talking about the technicalities, and I'll be happy to do that perhaps in the Q&A period. But the main idea is to get yourself on tape, feel good about what it looks like, and then just upload it. Okay, now let me take you to step 2. Step 2 is share it, because YouTube in itself is not only a search engine, it is also a social media tool, and it will generate its own algorithm to help people find your material. But it's not enough to just leave it in YouTube alone. Try to determine where it is that your students live or your intended students live, and then broadcast it to them on the media they use. In most of our academic circles, when you have a defined classroom population, you'll probably put it in an email, a link in an email. Here, I just made this video on quadratic equations, send it out to them, and that will be like one-to-one communication or one-to-many communication. That doesn't really help something go viral or to reach a much broader audience. For that, you have to link it in a social media account, such as Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, less so Snapchat, Twitter as well. Although these sites make people feel less happy, you will be directing them to YouTube, which makes them feel more happy, which is ultimately a net benefit, right? So do your thing. And by the way, speaking of grandma's rules, I was tempted to say, do your thing, but then I said, I better check it out. I looked it up, and the lyrics of that song are really not okay. So let's keep it to do your thing. Now, 2 is share the material. And the third one is analyze, because one of the great things about YouTube, again, because of its partnership, it's owned by Google, there are phenomenally powerful analytics in the back end of YouTube. So when you put your YouTube video out there, really within minutes, you will get really valuable feedback on who's watching your video and where they come from and how they're watching it, how long they're watching it, if they shared it, if they liked it, do they have any comments on it? The internet is such a big place that you get a tremendous amount of data. Let me show you a few slides from my own analytics. So this is the home page. This is representing 28 days of, which is the standard month in YouTube, letting me know kind of how things went up and down. And as you can see in the chart there, there's kind of like a natural variation, somewhere around 3,500 to 4,500 views a day, which is nice, especially for a channel as highly specialized as mine. I mean, I give hour-long lectures, which is a long period of time on YouTube, on Jewish history. And I'm proud to say that one of my favorite statistics is that people stay in these lectures for on average about 18 minutes, which, you know, if you gave a lecture in a lecture hall and people on average left within the first 18 minutes or so, you would feel pretty upset. But YouTube is quite different. People are clicking through, and to have an 18-minute retention rate is actually pretty significant. So I can see here, you know, trending upwards, trending downward. I can get a better sense of like, what ages are my students, you know, and I see here that I'm pretty popular from the 25 age group, fairly evenly through the 65 plus, which is, you know, the biggest chunk of the audience I really want to speak to, but 18 to 24 is something that I'd like to improve. Here I can see, for example, where they come from. You can also display this as a map, but looking at the United States, most of my viewers, the largest single chunk are coming from New York, about 4%, and then it's divided down below 4% all over the world. And here is one of my favorite kind of charts that I can compare times. So what this chart does is it's essentially the one that I showed you second about the ages of my demographics. And I can see that I am slowly trending a little bit younger, that 18 to 24 and 25 to 35 and 35 to 44 are all consistently growing. So it gives me a sense of how my videos are affecting people in real time. So these are like amazing analytics, and you can ask the analytics so many more questions that I've shown you here in this very brief demonstration. And then finally, once you've done that, repeat. Right? One of the things that's really interesting about YouTube is that the algorithm favors regularity, consistency, self-discipline, which are exactly the kind of skills that educators prize, right? You have a scheduled class, you show up at that scheduled class every time, several days a week, and you speak for an allotted amount of minutes. That's exactly the kind of thing that YouTube, as fundamentally an educational search engine, really loves. So as long as you keep doing these 4 steps with consistency, you will build a following in a remarkably short period of time. Now, let's just think for a second about applications of this material. This is not a comprehensive list, but I just want to give you a sense of the kind of things you could do with this kind of growing global audience. First is obvious, flipped classrooms, remarkably new and powerful tool that has been developed since the invention of the internet, which is the great Gutenberg invention of our era. Flipped classroom is basically, you know, the most valuable part of the class is not so much you talking, even though you talking is an amazing thing, but it's the interaction with students. It's the question and answer. It's the unexpected perspective that you hear from your students. So one of the ways you can do it is you can take care of the boring lecturing material and lecture to your camera or lecture to an audience, as I often do, and just record that lecture. Put it online, and that is what the students do on their own time, asynchronously. They check out the video beforehand. They watch the lecture beforehand. And then instead of scheduling a class, you schedule a discussion period or a Q&A or break out in small seminar groups. And this flips the classroom from putting the most valuable high concentration of human energy attention in from the lecture to the discussion, flipping it on its head, with tremendously beneficial results. I love flipped classrooms. If I had my druthers, everything I did would be flipped, because that's when you have the most fun, really, in the classrooms. Second example, you know, many students are using the YouTube videos in ways that I had never anticipated. Like, for example, it never occurred to me that students would actually want to hear a lecture more than once. But you know what? They do. And sometimes they go back and they play a 5-minute section over and over again. If they have difficulty understanding something, they can actually use it and review what they learned. And it's an extremely powerful tool. Even if you give the same lecture live and unrecorded, if you have a recorded version that you did earlier, send that out there. They'll review it. They will actually take good use of it. And by the way, on the same topic, YouTube also has speed controls, so they can control the speed at which it plays back. And many of my students actually prefer to listen to me speed it up to 1.5 and even 2 times my normal speaking voice, which is incomprehensible to me because I can't even understand myself at 2 times my own speaking voice. But they'll listen to me very fast. And it's funny when they come to my office hours and they say, "Oh, Dean Abramson, it's so strange to hear you speaking so slowly." But that happens. So using it as a review tool, tremendously powerful. Here is one of the more bizarre phenomena that I've discovered. Using your own YouTube videos, of course, using other people's YouTube videos is great, the variety, bringing another perspective, but even using your own YouTube classes in your own classes. I was once, back before I was teaching full-time in college, I used to teach a lot of middle school and high school, 12 years. And so I have a lot of experience, especially teaching grade 6. Oh my gosh, it tore a strip off my soul. But I remember once I had a high school seniors class. It was a beautiful spring day and they were not interested in learning anything, but I happened to have a short lecture, about 5 minutes, on the same topic that I was trying to teach. And, in a sense of frustration, I said, well, you're not listening to me. I put my own video of me talking about the same thing I was talking about live. And as soon as the video turned on, all of a sudden the students were like, it was like silent as a church. They were just like, I imagine churches are silent. I'm not actually sure if they're silent, but just in case my mom was watching this, but they were like so entranced. And I was thinking to myself, why? Here I am live and in person trying to explain this to you. Why is it better to watch me on the video screen? But in fact, it was. Maybe it's the way they grew up. They're so attached to screens. What happens on screens is important. I don't know. But using yourself as an in-class intro can actually be a very powerful pedagogic tool. Snow days, this is something that happens a lot here in New York, especially happened a lot in Canada, although it took a lot more snow for us to have a snow day in Canada. If you've got a bank of lectures and let's say you can't show up, so just send out a lecture to your students, say, hey, listen, for whatever reason, coronavirus, God forbid, I can't be there today. Here's a lecture of the topic that we were treating. And you can still have that asynchronous relationship with your students. There's so many examples. I've just given you a very quick list, but using YouTube is a way for you to think globally, to expand your classroom to a massive size while still acting locally, while still serving your more narrow constituency in the classroom. Very, very powerful dual usage of this technology. So I'm going to wrap it up now by welcoming you to Gen C. This is a term that was coined by Clay Shirky, shown here, an extremely influential thinker who really contemplates what does the internet mean? How does it represent such a fantastic, and I mean fantastic in the sense of being, amazing and overwhelming, not necessarily good, but how the internet represents such a sea change to our way of life in so many ways. And he said, we talk about Generation X, Generation Y, millennials, and so on. Really, we are Gen C, the creator generation. We are living at a period of time when the barriers to creating something and sharing it worldwide have dropped to zero or almost zero. Well, all of a sudden, we are able to interact with a global audience with remarkably low thresholds of difficulty. And the question is, how do we meet that challenge? How do we meet the expectations of our students who have grown up perfectly accepting that they can create just as well as anyone else? So this Gen C poses lots of new challenges for us as educators, but thankfully we have a lot of powerful tools to help us with that. If you're interested in developing your thoughts on this topic, I would strongly recommend you read some of the works of Clay Shirky. I've shown you 2 here. Cognitive Surplus essentially looks at the what we can do with a lot of the surplus intellectual energy that when I was a kid went into watching hours upon hours of Gilligan's Island. And all that time is now available to us. And with the tools of the internet, we can maximize what we want to do with our educational thoughts. And this is because, as he likes to say it, more is different. The fact that we have a larger classroom, a global classroom, changes the quality of our teaching. And I'll give you one example from that book. He comes from somewhere in the Midwest, and his experience of pizza growing up was that, you know, you had to get a certain amount of people. It was a special occasion. You ordered the pizza, you waited half hour, you drove in and you picked it up, or you had it delivered to your home, and that was pizza. When he first came to Midtown Manhattan and he started walking down the street and he saw that people were selling pizza by the slice, that was an overwhelming experience for him. He said, how can you possibly make pizza by the slice? Well, the reason is obvious, because back in Kansas, there's such a small number of people who might want pizza at any given day. It's not economically viable for the pizza manufacturer, the pizzeria, to produce a pizza on demand, slice on demand. It would go bad before they could sell the whole pie. But once the demand is so high, like it is in Midtown Manhattan, they can easily produce pizza after pizza on the assurance that, yes, people would literally consume them slice by slice. So more is different. It means that you can eat pizza just on a whim, walking down the street, something unheard of in Kansas because of the size of the audience. That's the Cognitive Surplus book. And here comes everybody. He expands on this and he says, now with social media, all of a sudden we have the power of the crowd, which can direct us in areas of research and of presentation of our materials in radical new ways. It's a little bit, I'm running out of time, so I don't want to go into that thesis too much, but I want to conclude with one last thought for you. You know, here we are, we're all online because of the coronavirus situation. And it is more than unfortunate. It's tragic, and it is terrifying to think about this, the kind of suffering that people are enduring right now in many parts of the world, particularly here in New York City, has been very, very hard hit by the coronavirus. And, you know, I hope that the merit of our communal learning should go to assist in their speedy recovery. But with this horrible challenge also come the discovery of new opportunities. Just like the moonshot, which is a phenomenal event in human history, also represented the discovery of Velcro. I hope with some of these ideas, I may have inspired you to go out and find some of your own Velcro for yourself. With that, I'm going to conclude this presentation. I want to thank you tremendously for your attention, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Henry Abramson, thank you for this amazing presentation. I know everyone who attended enjoyed it, and I think there's so much of amazing feedback already in the chat tab, so you are really appreciated.